Welcome to the Sunday Superversive live stream. I am your host, Benjamin Wheeler, and I'm here with my co-host, Anthony Marquetta. And I'm here with um,
Justin
Justin
Tarquin.
Tarquin.
Come on, Ben. Come on.
I almost said a hobo I found off the street and paid a ham sandwich to pretend to be Justin Tarquin.
No one would know.
He says he's a professor of literature, and I believe him.
That's a good one.
Sure, why not?
All right. For reals, we have Justin Tarquin on the line. Justin, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. How's everyone there?
Pretty good. You know,
Yeah.
less existential horror recently than usual, so I'm pretty happy. How about you, Anthony?
I've had a start to my summer that's been so good, I'm kind of suspicious. It's like,
Excellent.
what's going to happen? It's too much good news.
But no, we're not here for ourselves. We're here to discuss Justin's new book, Kings of the Corona.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a bit about it?
Well, it's new in the sense that I had a cover made for it's a novella that was actually when did it come out in Anthony's
Oh, man, that's a great question. Let me see if I can find my book on my Kindle.
27
A few years ago.
Yeah, it's been years and years. But it was long for the format. I can't seem to write things that are under 10,000 words. And it got up to, I think, 15 or 16,000 words when it reached its final form. And,
yeah, I have my own story about that. I told it a few years ago.
Okay.
But go ahead, finish what you're saying first.
Oh, well, just I thought it had been out of print for a while. I don't know where to get. I guess we can't really get Tales of the Once and Future King at this point.
Yeah,
And,
2017, by the way.
Yeah. So I had an actual artist make a cover for it, and thought I would try putting it up on Amazon to offer it for sale. And I've sold probably a dozen of them or so. So
Excellent.
Fantastic.
thank you. So just getting an idea about making novels like that, making publications like this.
Yeah, so I could give some context on Kings of the Corona. So for people in the olden days of the old guard who remember these things, Tales of the Once and Future King was a project that I had a few years ago. I conceived of it as a follow-up to my book God Robot. To my great chagrin, even though I thought it was a much more ambitious idea, everybody seemed to be way more interested in the idea for God Robot. No joke, I did an interview with someone where it was meant to talk about Tales of the Once and Future King, and when I brought up God Robot, they were like, wait, tell us all about that. And then I'm like, it wasn't even my idea. It was actually John C. Wright's idea, God Robot. Tales was mine. So I'm like, I didn't even come up with it. But okay, now I'm proud of God Robot too. But anyway, Tales of the Once and Future King was conceived of as I think it was 8 or 9 short stories, I don't remember, in God Robot that I had connected together with a frame story in the style of iRobot, if you've ever read that.
Right.
So in iRobot, he has a collection of 9 stories and a little frame story around it to connect them all together, right? So I did something like that. And a few of the reviews criticized the frame story as being rather weak, which, in my opinion, kind of missed the point a bit. It wasn't really meant to be particularly strong. Like in iRobot, it's literally just like, oh, Susan Calvin's retiring and telling me stories, it was just meant to provide a little context to why these stories are being told, right? In Tales of the Once, but I took the criticism to heart and I said, I'm going to try something really ambitious. I'm going to write like essentially a novel around these stories, and we're going to do more of them. So it's going to be even more difficult, and they're going to be interconnected together, and it's going to be awesome. And like nobody seemed to really care about this premise. I thought it was like a super ambitious idea, like interconnected 20 short stories from all different authors. You know, it's going to be wicked cool. And we're going to have like characters and a plot and everything and like a unique world. And it was like this post apocalyptic future. Nobody cared. Didn't go anywhere. But anyway, I had a 10,000 word limit. And then along came Justin's Kings of the Corona. And I was like, oh man, like, was like, should we even, me and my sister was my co-editor. I was like, should we even bother reading this? It's like, you know, we could just auto reject it. Right. And it's like, nobody would blame us because we did have a word count. And it's like, yeah, just give it a look. And if there's anything, you know, like if we get sucked in, then great. And if we don't, we could just reject it without finishing it and not feel guilty because we only promised up to 10,000 words anyway. Well, to my chagrin, it was great. I loved it. So, which was really annoying because then that meant that I did need to read the whole thing, which I did. And fantastic story, great the whole way through. Great little, you know, one of the reviews of Tales of the Once and Future King did point out that skewed young adult. It was meant to. I had marketed it and always conceived of it as a collection of juvenile stories. Juvenile being my catch-all term for anything from children's up to young adult. And your story fit right in that range. It was very, very funny. Very clever little story. Just kind of a gem. And now, even to this day, people occasionally pop up. Like you'll see it on John C. Wright's website. People will go in and go, oh man, if I wish I had a way to read Justin's Kings of the Corona. That was a great story. And I agree. My recollection of it was, annoyance because it was so good that I couldn't reject it out of hand, even though it was like way longer than our word count. So we were just like, all right, fine, you're in. You can. And then we made your story like kind of the centerpiece story of the thing, which was like they were putting on a show to distract people while a heist was being pulled off in the background. Yeah. And your story ended up kind of being the centerpiece of that because it was the longest. So we stuck it right in the middle of that. And that was like a thing that their theater troupe was putting on. That was the conceit of the stories. How successful was Tales of the Once and Future King? Probably not very. I mean, it was like objectively not successful in that it really didn't sell. With that said, I don't know how much of that is my fault. Anthologies are a notoriously difficult sell. They tend not to do that well. And Superversive Press was a very new and very tiny publishing house that didn't end up doing much to begin with. I probably could have marketed better. I didn't do a very good job marketing it, so that's on me. If I had the opportunity to rewrite it today, it would probably be pretty substantially different. I don't know if I would change a lot necessarily, but the writing would hopefully be better. You know. But Tales of Kings of the Corona, though, was a great story. My main recollection, like in my head, when you go like, well, what do you think of when you think of that story, is I remember it being hilarious. So why don't you tell us a little bit about like what Kings of the Corona is about?
I'm glad that came through because, I mean, as I read it, I keep chuckling, but I think to myself, I wonder if anybody else finds this funny.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's kind of a, it's, how did I describe it? A fantasy, mystery, Arthurian young adult tale. It's set in a mythical valley that I called Palafal in Arthurian Britain. And this little valley is a place that's got a king. It's been ruled, as long as the people can remember, it's been ruled by a series of kings who have what they call a corona, which is a light that shines off of their head. And when one king dies, the corona lifts up and moves over to somebody else at random. I mean, they don't know, or as far as they can tell, it's at random, and sort of anoints this other person the king. And whatever the king tells somebody to do, they either do it or they suffer some kind of a misfortune pretty quickly. And if they continue to disobey, then the misfortunes get worse. Like, they could break an arm or something. They could, something painful, something that they, at least in the people's minds, is connected to their disobedience. So well, anyway, that's the situation. And the kings, whenever somebody becomes king, they sort of turn into a real jerk. Or if they're not a jerk already, they tend to become one. And so the people are not really in a very happy situation, but they get their life. They live their lives as well as they can. And then one day, a knight appears from the court of King Arthur, and I named the knight Sagrador. I just wanted to make it some name that had not been taken, so that I don't have any backstory connected with real Arthuriana to fill. So this is just some obscure knight that nobody has ever heard of. But he appears and he talks to them about, oh, well, that's not how our king is. We have a king named Arthur, and he defends the kingdom, and we owe him loyalty, and like this and that. And so the mystery, I mean, there's sort of a mystery going on of why is there a corona in this place? Where did it come from? What causes it? Is there some way to get rid of it? And the whole story takes place in the course of about, is it one day or maybe 2 days? And during those 2 days, there are 3 separate kings, not to give too much away, but you see a series of kings even in that short span. And eventually the secrets are revealed, and our hero, who is a young man named Morrigal, gets his girl, and well, I shouldn't give it all away, but there's a happy ending. I like happy endings. I'm not going to hide that part.
Oh yeah. I remember the story having a lot of irony, wordplay type of humor. Very likable characters. It's a really great little tale. I
Thank you.
have been. So here's a question for you. I've been interested in Arthurian fiction for a long time. It's always fascinated me. Particularly, I've always been very very taken by the interplay of greatness and sin, is how I would describe it, at the heart of Arthurian fiction. You have the greatest kingdom of all undone by the greatest knight having this horrible affair with the king's wife, and then the betrayal by his son, right? The drama of it always worked to me. It's very I think it's very effective dramatically. And then of course you have the return of the king and all of that fun stuff. So lots of things that I think really work about the Arthurian legend that have always captivated me. My favorite literary version of it, I do love the Once and Future King, particularly the Ill-Made Knight. I think it's an outstanding book, but my favorite version of it has always been Lawhead's Pendragon Cycle. Do you have any familiarity with the Arthurian stories? Do you have any particular favorites? Anything you like or dislike?
No, I'm not as familiar with it as you are. I read I read The Once and Future King years and years ago, and I guess I've I remember back in college there was some discussion and some readings from Arthuriana. And I know on my shelf I've got a copy of I don't know how to say it, Chrétien de Troyes.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Uh,
That's like the Knight of the Cart.
yes, that's in there. I've read just a bit out of that, but that too was a long time ago. And now you said people were not that interested in your Tales of the Once and Future King idea. That was actually what inspired me to start writing something. You were on a podcast and you were talking about how God Robot had come out and that your next project was going to be Tales of the Once and Future King. And I heard the description and I thought, oh, I've got to try writing something for that. I thought that was a great idea. So
Oh, I appreciate that.
So I downloaded, what was it? Not Mallory, it was the earliest one.
Mabinogion?
No, it was the history of the kings of
Oh, Geoffrey of Monmouth.
Monmouth. That's it, Geoffrey of Monmouth. And I did kind of a quick skim read of that to try to get a picture of what was England like, what kinds of stories did they tell, and the names too. So the names in my story, the male names at least, were created in a spreadsheet. I took a list of names from Geoffrey of Monmouth, and there's a kind of a computer trick that you can do where you take the frequency of 3-letter combinations and then you just give it a letter to start up, and you generate words by the combinations. Well, I'm not describing it well, but I doubt if anybody's interested anyway. There's a way of making words that sound like the words in your list, and I used that to get a bunch of names. So my main character, Morrigal, his boss, Bodlout, the knight himself, Sagrador, the bad guy, Gillis, were all names that came out of my spreadsheet, generated at random. The only one that was actually made another way was the girlfriend, Lunwin, whose name I made up from a list of Saxon, I think they were name particles in Saxon. Lun meant moon, and Wyn, W-Y-N, meant
That's a clever way of doing it.
fair. So I constructed her name, meaning fair moon. Yeah, I mean, and also I wanted, so this is supposed to be a valley that had Saxon people living in it, and then the Romans came and they started building an aqueduct, and then I guess Rome fell and the legion was called home. So its culture is sort of a strange mesh of Latin and Saxon, and the names are kind of a weird blending of that as well. Some of them I would change, like Sagrador's squire is named Kincarius, and I spelled that with both a K and a C, which I guess doesn't really make much sense when you think about it, because it would be either one or the other, and it probably wouldn't be. I mean, it doesn't really make sense as a name of somebody who would come from Camelot anyway. So maybe if I were to rewrite it today, I would change that name.
I've never had an issue with it. It always worked for me. But
Okay, good.
Most readers I think aren't going to be that deep into the lore, though I understand.
That's
I understand the desire to get everything right. Yeah, the writing process is very interesting. Like, so many ideas I have evolved from earlier ideas in really interesting ways, and I always end up going back to Arthurian fiction. Like, I currently write for Pinkerton's Ghost, or at least, actually, technically speaking, currently I do not write for Pinkerton's Ghost. I read for Pinkerton's Ghost because I'm busy with other things. But I have been writing for Pinkerton's Ghosts, and when I introduce my character, they're like, we're supernatural detectives, that sort of thing. Like, literally think a Christian version of Supernatural if you want to get a sort of vibe for what we're doing. If that means anything to you.
Mhm.
Well, my character in his very first story lives in New Jersey, we have a forest in the middle of the state known as the Pine Barrens that is somewhat famous for having a lot of spooky supernatural events. And I stuck Morgana from Arthurian legend in the middle of the forest.
Hmm.
And does it make any sense in New Jersey? No, it absolutely does not. So much backstory was needed to justify this move. But hey, we had a long form radio series to do it with, so why not? Morgana's there. Mordred shows up in Ben's stories, but Mordred shows up because I had Morgana show up. So, now we've like opened the door to this. And then in a weird Arthurian connection, there's a whole subplot in my story in my stories where there's a fictional city I invented called Shipton. That's like, just a horrible inner city type place that's led by and there's like a gang leader named Blood Money who's a vampire, right? That whole thing came from a superhero story I had, of all things. That was the original version of it, where like the immortal Sir Lancelot was wandering around like inner city New Jersey, which was a juxtaposition that I thought was really amusing and interesting. That the immortal Sir Lancelot's like a superhero in inner city New Jersey, and he's fighting vampires and whatever. Well, I removed him. He's not in this. Lancelot, in fact, in Pinkerton's Ghost, I think is canonically dead. But the vampire remained, and the setting remained. So it just kind of keeps showing up in my fiction in various ways. And Tales of the Once and Future King itself, it is the only published thing that I have in like a larger. So I mentioned I was a fan of Stephen Lawhead's Pendragon Cycle, which at least should be coming out as a show soon, produced by the Daily Wire. Which should be interesting. Go ahead.
Really?
Yeah, as a matter of fact.
They're actually doing that? You're not just wishing that it would?
No. Let me find a link to it. I'll show it to you. Pendragon. I've even seen like there are some pictures. Pendragon Cycle show. So they seem to be pretty far into the production. That doesn't necessarily mean it will come out, but yeah, here you go. Daily Wire's website. Coming soon, exclusively on Daily Wire Plus. So I hope they do. I'm putting it in our private chat. There we go.
Cool.
Anyway, yeah, Lawhead's Pendragon Cycle. He wrote a follow-up book to it. I loved it. It's my favorite Arthurian adaptation. He actually just came out with a new book this year, believe it or not, of all things. Is Pendragon still coming out after all the people who quit Daily Wire? No idea, but it's still on their website, so we'll see. Anyway. Yeah, the Pendragon Cycles, Lawhead wrote a follow-up book called that's sort of a sequel and sort of a spin-off and sort of just the next book in the series, called Avalon, about the return of Arthur. Now, this is always a very interesting idea. Arthur is supposed to return in Britain's hour of greatest need. How do you handle this, right? Well, one way to do it, I've noticed I've seen 3 ideas that I find kind of acceptable. One clever idea was used by Tim Powers in his book, The Drawing of the Dark, which is that, as a matter of fact, because you need to answer the question of like, why didn't Arthur return during the Blitz, right? That seems to be a pretty big deal. So Tim Powers just uses the idea, well, Arthur did return during all of the crisis points in history. He just kind of fought the secret war, behind the scenes, right? So, which I thought was extremely clever, and that's what's going on. The Drawing of the Dark is about the siege of Vienna and like Arthur's return during the siege of Vienna, which is super cool. Loved it. Not my favorite book, but definitely a worthwhile read. The Drawing of the Dark by Tim Powers. Another way to do it is the way that John C. Wright does it, which is, well, the hour of greatest need is just going to be the end times. So Arthur's going to return at the end times. And that is how John C. Wright talks about it in his Moth and Cobweb series, that Arthur is sleeping and will be awoken at the end times because that's the actual hour of greatest need. That's an acceptable answer. I can live with that. Stephen Lawhead did something different. And this was why I wrote Tales of the Once and Future King, actually. He had Arthur come back at a time when the figurehead monarchy of Great Britain was about to be voted out. And then Merlin finds this guy who is the technical next in line for the throne and says, no, you gotta take the throne because otherwise the monarchy is going to be removed from Britain entirely. So that's Britain's hour of greatest need. And I thought and still think it's not a bad book because Stephen Lawhead is not a bad author, right? It's well written. There are good moments and there are good things in it. But I thought and still think that was lame. You're telling me that losing the figurehead monarchy of Britain is such a huge crisis that Arthur needs to return in order to stop it. They don't do anything. They're completely useless.
True.
What is Arthur even doing here? And then, they don't even really explain this in the book. At one point, one of the characters even brings it up, why are we bothering? And Merlin has to go to him, basically just says something like, anybody else who has that opinion, leave now. It's okay, great. So we're not going to address this. Very valid point. What? It seems like Lawhead just is a monarchist and sees an inherent value in the monarchy, but that doesn't even really answer the question, because that would imply that the current royal family somehow is descended from Arthur, because they need to keep that royal family, which is definitely not the case historically. So I don't know why the restoration of, keeping this current form of the British monarchy is so important. Couldn't Arthur just arise from a different family as king later? Why? There's something mystical going on here. Why do you need to do this through Parliament? I don't know. I didn't like it. It always disappointed me. So, Tales of the Once in... I'm sorry, go ahead. I've been talking too long. You're a guest.
Popping in. It sounds like hand-waving to give him an explanation for why Arthur might be returning in the near future. I mean, I assume this is in the near future, right?
Yeah, at least at the time it was written, it would have been the near future. I actually don't know. It might be the current present. I don't remember. Yeah, or he might not have specified a date just to, make it timeless.
Yeah, but they're talking, I guess, about, do we really need the monarchy? Should we abolish the monarchy? So that could turn it into a current events type story. And it would give him an excuse for having Arthur.
Oh, yeah. Here's the thing, though. I might accept this as an answer if the entire book wasn't about him, campaigning, basically, to prevent the monarchy from being abolished. It just ends with him being crowned.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm okay, so I don't get it. What exactly is he going to do?
Does he abolish Parliament?
That would be really funny, but basically the only concrete, Lawhead is very vague in the book about what the new Arthur, whose name is actually James, that's the middle name Arthur, not that it matters, but he's very vague about what he's actually going to do. It's he's going to do something social programs, and it's very uncontroversial social programs that you need to be a psychopath to oppose, right? Hey, you treat poor people badly. Yeah, okay. I guess if the Parliament did in fact treat poor people badly, I would want to help. I hope that Arthur would do something about it. But a Muslim currently rules London. Are you are you gonna what's the point here? You fought against Saxons. This doesn't bother you?
Yeah.
Yeah, to say nothing of New York City, not that democracy is a protection, but whatever. I don't know. I thought it was lame. So Tales of the Once and Future King as a book was entirely about me saying I want to create a situation that's so bad that Arthur would in fact actually return, because it's literally Britain's hour of greatest need. So the setting of Tales was post-apocalyptic. None of this actually appears in the book itself, which is kind of funny too. Like, it's just sort of implied, but it's like the far future. And I think in my backstory, I had like there was an EMT that nuked the entire country, and then there was a civil war, and then like countries lost contact with each other, and bombs were dropped, and then the population dropped because there was a drought and everybody scattered. And now at the time of the book, invaders have arrived. So I'm like, now that's a situation where I can imagine Arthur needing to come back. Not like, oh, the Windsors aren't going to be in power anymore. Like, good, I guess. I don't know why we need Arthur here for this, but sure. Like, the Windsors don't do anything, so I don't really get why them either being or not being in power particularly matters.
They're also not even English descended. They're German descended.
Yeah, that too. So it's like, I don't know. It was a weird. I can't go so far as to say the book was like bad, because Lawhead's a good writer. Right? So like, it wasn't entirely worthless. It wasn't unentertaining. But I just came out of it feeling sort of gypped that this is like the grand return of Arthur. We see his campaign in Parliament for re-election almost. Like, that's not what it was. Like, it wasn't re-election. It was to prevent the monarchy from being dissolved. He has to like win the vote, right? But it's still like, that's what it felt like. Like, I'm reading a story about Arthur's political campaign. And then I'm like, okay, I didn't really imagine that Arthur's return would go like this. It's funny because there have been times where like King Under the Mountains have returned. One of the more fun stories was Constantine the 11th Palaiologos, right? The last king of the Byzantine Empire. He's one of the kings under the mountain. That's like the motif of the king who will return, right? Someone actually, like in the early 1900s, you could look this up. It's a fascinating story. Somebody came claiming to be Constantine the 11th Palaiologos, like he was the returned king. And he ended up like leading an army and getting pretty far, like before getting, like, he got a following that did fairly well until he was finally defeated in battle. And this was in like, what, the 1900s? Like, it does happen. It's almost a shame that he failed, because I would have liked to believe it. Well, I don't know anything. To be clear, like, for all I know, this could have been absolute lunatic or a monster. Like, I only know the story. I don't know anything about it in detail. So, like, for all I know, I could be like, well, good riddance, dude was a nutcase or whatever, right? But still, you got to admit, the idea is kind of appealing.
Yeah, I remember C.S. Lewis. I remember in one of his books, he said, many say that Arthur will return in Britain's hour of greatest need, and I say the sooner the better.
Yeah, that's a great line by Lewis. Fantastic line by Lewis. He deals with Arthur in a few of his stories. Particularly, he has his that hideous strength, where Merlin returns, and there is my favorite moment of the book, the fantastic dialogue that Merlin has, where he's trying to figure out what to do, and they need to explain the modern world to him in a way that Merlin would understand. And Merlin's just horrified at how bad things have gotten. So they're going to him. He's like, all right, I can't remember exactly, but it was something like, okay, so surely we can round up the surviving knights, right? And like, maybe take it that way. And they go, no, I'm afraid there are no surviving knights. He's like, he's like, what? There are no knights left? He goes, okay, it's fine. He's like, there are Christians, right? Maybe we could rally the Christians, right? Like, we'll go to the quotes. Like, no, I'm afraid that they don't do that anymore. Like, they don't call crusades anymore. He's like, they don't call crusades. He's like, well, then how do they defend themselves? He goes, all right. And then, like, you see he's thinking very hard, and he goes, okay, then we'll have to appeal to the emperor. Like, that's our own, we'll have to go to Byzantium, and we'll have to come back with help. And then they're like, no, the emperor's gone. He's like, the emperor's gone? He's like, what happened? And he goes, all right, there's only one option left. I hate to do this, but we're going to have to ask for help from the pagan nations of the East. We're going to need to get allies. And then they go, no, I'm afraid that the government's not really interested in negotiating with them. I go, well, why not? They're a threat. Like, he goes, yeah, but they're actually kind of in the government. And then he's like, oh, this is so much worse than I thought. He's like, you're in bad shape. And they're like, kind of. Yeah.
That moment when you realize what hour of greatest need actually means.
Yeah.
Oh.
At some point in that sequence, he said, well, maybe we should appeal to the common people. And the objection was, no, they have an engine called the press, whereby the people are deceived.
Yeah, that was it. Fantastic. Probably my favorite moment of the book. Pitch perfect satire, but Lewis really excelled at that, like kind of restating concepts that we know about, but in a way that makes you think about it differently, right? Like Lewis was very good at that. That was like peak Lewis,
Yeah. Things in very simple terms, which, I mean, he has to explain it in simple terms to Merlin because Merlin doesn't have any context. But putting it that way makes us see it in a different way, makes us see it in simpler terms.
Well, that's the entire climax of Out of the Silent Planet, too, which is one of my favorite scenes of Lewis, where Weston gives a grand speech and Ransom is forced to translate it into simple language and reveals the speech to be absolute nonsense.
I love that.
Yeah, he's like, all right. So Weston's like, because I am a man, I have, we are more rational, more enlightened. And then Ransom's trying like, he says, because he's smarter than you, therefore he should be able to kill you. And that he's allowed to do this because of his intelligence. And he's like, look, man, I'm really trying. I think he even says something like he didn't want to make Ransom sound bad. Like he was doing his best, but this was the best he could do. But
and then he
Lewis
beats him to death.
What was that?
And then he beats him to death.
No, that's Paralandra.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
No, at the end of Out of the Silent Planet, the response of the aliens is great. They're like, all right, here's the deal. He goes, they go, I see what's going on here. They go, it looks like this one, and then they point to like Divine, who they go, he's just entirely driven by greed, and there's like no person left there. And honestly, we would just kill him if it wasn't forbidden for us to do that. And they're like, because there's nothing worthwhile here. And then they point to Weston. They go, he's more interesting because he does have an idea of virtue. He apparently sees virtue in like the continuation of the human species, but he has elevated it to an idol, essentially, right? Like to the highest good. And that leads him to atrocities. But there might be some hope for him because he hasn't completely lost the idea of right and wrong. Which is really interesting because objectively in both this book and then you see in the following book, Weston is both the worse and more dangerous person of the two of them. And yet he is the one who they consider to be less lost. Very, very wise by Lewis. But yeah, the Space Trilogy is a fascinating book for a lot of reasons. But yeah, that dialogue with Merlin always gets me. Especially my favorite part is when he goes to appeal to the Emperor, and then they have to tell him there's no Emperor, and Merlin's like, "Oh no, nah." He's like, "No Emperor." What? He's like, "This is bad."
Yeah. Now, some people have pointed out that there's a sort of omission there. Why didn't Merlin say, "Well, I guess maybe we should appeal to the Pope"? Why didn't Merlin say that?
That's true, and probably because Lewis didn't want to distract
Yeah,
because he was that's what I would suspect.
there would be no way to write it without. I mean, he'd have to say terrible things. He was very much a mere Christianity. What connects us is better than what is more important than what divides us.
Yeah, there would be no real partisan way to say it. You would need to do one of two things. You would either need to go, those dirty Protestants are in the way, or you would need to go, the church has become corrupt, and Lewis probably didn't want to do either one. So he just kind of skated by it. But yeah, that is a bit of an omission. That's true.
From Merlin's standpoint, I suppose. Well, I would assume.
You would think. Well, Lawhead. It's interesting with Lawhead because he's a Christian writer, and the Pendragon cycle is very, very Christian, which is great. I love it. It has some of my favorite scenes. Like there's a particularly in the book Arthur. The early section of the book is all about Arthur winning the battles around Britain to consolidate his throne, and it all climaxes in a battle where one of his men betrays him and like holes up with a group of barbarians or whatever in the city. And this is how it's explained. We have been watching Arthur win like impossible battle after impossible battle through the use of like clever strategies and trickery, right? But now, because of this betrayal, like all of his wins can be reversed in instant. The situation is very fragile, which, by the way, is traditional in Arthurian lore. For this is what happens with Mordred at the end, right? The position of Britain is always very fragile under Arthur. So they need to make a decision. They can leave. They said there is just enough room for them to retreat, but if they retreat, they can then this army can consolidate its position. All of Arthur's gains will be lost. We'll be like back to square one. Yeah. Or they can stand and fight, but if they're going to be attacking into a fortified position, there doesn't seem to be any way that they could possibly win this battle. So Arthur, you're waiting kind of to see what's Arthur going to come up with now. Like, what's he going to do? He's come up with all of these brilliant scenes. So Arthur walks out. They're on the edge of the ocean, right? And he walks out among the water and he tells everybody there, he goes, here's what we're going to do. If any of you have not been baptized yet, get baptized right now. And he says, you're going to be baptized in the waters of the ocean. And he goes, we fight in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. And then Merlin walks out among them and announces that in order to win the battle, they must build a wall of prayer. So Arthur says, then let's get on it. And then the next morning, they notice Arthur is just moving rocks back and forth, and they're curious. So Bedivere and Kay are talking and go, all right, I'm going to go and see what's up. And they talk to Arthur, and then he has a conversation with them, and then they start joining him. And then more and more people learn, and they realize that Arthur has taken Merlin's words literally and has started to build a wall around them. And then they go, okay, so, but why? Now, first, they start getting mocked by the barbarians in the city for like, what are you doing? You're blocking your only escape route. But then as the wall grows larger, the barbarians grow afraid because it occurs to them that the only person who would ever block their own escape route is someone who knows that they will win the battle. So Arthur builds the wall and waits. And then at night, the barbarians can't bear it any longer and charge, and Arthur wins the day because the barbarians have left the walls and it's implied to be, through a form of divine intervention that they attacked when they did and how they did. Marvelous scene. I'd love to see more of that, but Lawhead's kind of interesting because he is very definitely Protestant. He has a book called Patrick that is about St. Patrick, and I remember reading I haven't read the book, but I've looked at a lot of reviews of it, and there's a lot of people who are like, this is a weird portrayal of Patrick. They portray him as like a proto-Protestant. And the books are, I wouldn't call them anti-Catholic at all. He just doesn't really address the Catholic Church, right? But I will say that Britain at that time would probably have been Catholic. And that's not really talked about in the stories, which is kind of interesting. It's more generically Christian.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I do think that Christianity is very much it's as much a part. Let me put it to you. Let's put it this way. So the stories of Arthur do kind of go back to a pagan era if you really, really dig, right? Like the Mabinogion is very has kind of a pagan flair to it. Now, it doesn't go back to the pre-Christian era because they are AD dated, like they don't date to the BC era, but they do have a sort of pagan flair to them. However, Arthur's Christianity and the importance of that to the Arthurian lore is as much a part of is more a part of Arthur than Lancelot and Guinevere in the affair. That came later than Arthur's Christianity. Arthur's Christianity was a bigger part and more baked into the stories than even Lancelot and Guinevere were. It was always a very, very important part of the story. I do think a lot of the modern adaptations miss that to their peril. Even T.H. White, as great as the Once and Future King is, kind of addresses it, but he addresses it in a very modernist way. He makes it very explicit that he believes that that original sin does not exist, and Arthur doesn't believe original sin exists, but he also has them questing for the Grail for spiritual reasons and believing in God. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, by the way, this is apropos of nothing, but somebody in the comments earlier asked, is the Daily Wire really coming out with the Pendragon cycle after all the firings? I will say this. I just looked at the page for it, and there's a video on there that says a bittersweet finish. Behind the scenes during week 16 of the production of the Pendragon cycle, and get a glimpse of some emotional farewells as they wrap, and it says wrapping production. So it looks as if they finished filming it at the very least. So that's a good sign if you're hoping to see it. I guess, although you're right. Like, I don't know what they're gonna do about the fact that Brett Cooper has a major role in this. That's really funny.
I don't know that person.
So Brett Cooper, I think someone mentioned it. Brett Cooper was fired from the Daily Wire. There was like a whole controversial thing. I do not know or care about it at all, and I don't think I've ever heard Brett Cooper speak before in my life. I literally, like, if you asked me who to side with, I wouldn't know. Right? Like, if you asked me who in that dispute to side with, but Brett Cooper worked for the Daily Wire for a long time, and then there was some sort of blow up between them, and she was fired. And she's like a major character in the Pendragon Cycle show. So, oops.
Personalities.
So let's see what we do have some comments. Yeah, this is Merg Maggle Remaxis, who's in our comments says they'd have to recast Merlin's Love since she was portrayed by Brett Cooper. Yeah, I suppose, unless they want to pay, unless because it's already wrapped, they're willing to pay her, but that would be funny. And then they said, so is Arthur doing that now? The British definitely need him that way now to fight. I think he's referring to fighting the secret war behind the scenes. Perhaps they do. I don't think Arthur sired the Windsors, and didn't the Plantagenets have some Roman blood in them? Absolutely no idea. Couldn't tell you. I wish I knew. And the Space Trilogy is underrated, and I despise the BBC's new audiobook version of That Hideous Strength. I didn't know the BBC made a new audiobook version of That Hideous Strength, but because it's the BBC, I believe you. I'm sure it's awful. So, Justin, do you have any other projects coming?
Well, I'm a very slow writer. In the years since Kings of the Corona came out. I've only had 2 stories that have reached the light of day. I've started several others, but some of them I get close to the finish with and say, I don't think I like this. But the latest one is a story called What God Hath Joined, and it appeared in a collection that Misha Burnett put together called Till Death Do Us Part.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's an anthology that came out just last month, I guess, in May. And it's about 11 stories. Declan Finn is in there, Blake Carpenter, John C. Wright wrote an introduction to it. And all of the stories are the protagonists of each story is a husband and wife couple, a happily married, proper husband and wife couple. And they're all action adventure stories. So the cover of this is just gorgeous. It's this like bride and groom sitting there laughing, having a great time. And in the background, there's this exploding building or something. And they're sort of so in love that they're oblivious of what's going on around them, even though their clothes are covered with soot and tattered. So it's I thought it was a great idea for an anthology. And fortunately, I had been thinking for some years of a superhero couple. This is an idea that I had back when Russ and Morgan Newquist's Silver Empire series was going. If you remember, they had a series called The Heroes Unlimited.
Oh, yeah. I do remember that.
Various authors joined and started series of books with different superheroes, or primes, they called them. John Mollison had a good one. His was Overlook, I think. I enjoyed his. And who was it? J.D. Cowan?
Yes.
Got it right here. Has one, the Gemini. Here it is. The Gemini Man. But anyway, as this was coming out, I had this idea. My wife and I was driving someplace with my wife, and I had an idea, and I just popped it off to her because I want to bounce it off. And I said, what if there was a married couple and they find that they have superpowers in proportion to how much they love each other and are emotionally committed to each other? And I kind of described this as the idea that, in sacramental marriage, people gain special graces and not exactly superpowers, but superpowers could be an analogy for that. You could read it on 2 levels. And Amy liked the idea. She thought, oh, that's a great idea. I would love to read that. So I kind of let that percolate in my mind. And then some time after that, like years, I percolate stories very slowly. But I read something that John C. Wright wrote. I think it was an essay titled Spear and Distaff, where he was talking about the male virtues symbolized by the heraldic device of the spear, and the female in the heraldic device of the distaff, and the symbolism of these things. The distaff being I guess it's like a spool that is used for spinning cloth or spinning thread. And as I read that, I thought, oh, that's what I should do. My superhero couple, they should have superpowers, but not the same ones. The male should have, the man should have powers that are more masculine, and the woman should have powers that are more feminine. So I came up with this idea where the man, whom his superhero name is Spear, can throw a bolt of energy, and the wife can collect the energy into kind of a filament and throw it and swing from it like Spider-Man. And the man can fly. He doesn't have the Spider-Man type power. The man has super strength. The woman has super speed. The man has like supernatural powers of manipulating technology. The wife has supernatural powers of reading emotions and sensing intuitively that there's danger around. And so I had this idea that I'd kind of been thinking about of a story about spear and distaff. And then Misha Burnett put out his call for an anthology of husband and wife action adventure stories, and I thought, oh, I've got to write something for that now. And so I did, but of course I couldn't keep it down under 10,000 words, so it was about 12,000 words in the end. And I came up, and the story that I came up with was What God Hath Joined.
Sounds like a really, really cool idea. I do like the analogy to sacramental marriage. That's adds a nice dimension to it. So I have seen some ideas like that before. The main thing I've seen, I don't know if you've heard of My Hero Academia, which is this used to be a very common topic of discussion between Ben and I on the show. It's an anime, superhero anime. Really fun. One of the characters was a character named the Gentle Criminal, who was like a Robin, who saw himself as a Robin Hood type criminal and was mostly kind of harmless, but he was going to do something that was going to interrupt like what the students were doing, so the main character had to stop him. And he had a partner with the name La Brava, and their powers were called quirks, and his quirk, I don't remember what it was called, but he could create like bouncy force fields, which is a cool idea. But her quirk was called love, and all it did was if she was in love with someone, she could give them a massive power boost.
Huh.
So, which was pretty fun. I did like that concept. Your idea of giving the hero and the heroine two powers that kind of fit their personalities reminded me of The Incredibles. Do you know The Incredibles at all?
Oh, sure. I've seen it many times.
Yeah, that was
And
unironically one of my favorite movies to this day. I love The Incredibles. If you listen to Brad Bird describe it, the father has super strength because he's the one who's supposed to be carrying everything, right?
yeah.
And the mother is elastic because the mom needs to stretch to fill a bunch of different roles in her children's life, right? And run a bunch of different things. And then he even extends it to the children, right? Like Violet can turn invisible because she's a shrinking Violet, right? She's a teenager who is shy. And Dash has super speed because he mentioned kids of that age often are like bursting with energy and running around a lot. And he even extends it to Jack Jack, where he goes, then why does Jack Jack have multiple powers? Because kids can be anything. You don't know what they're, we don't know yet how they're going to end up. So they have unlimited potential.
Yeah. I love that movie. I love the first one much more than the second. But
yeah, the second was a big disappointment.
But yeah, and then the so were they modeled explicitly on the Fantastic Four?
Bird never mentioned that. Several people have pointed that out. It's the only good Fantastic Four movie we've ever gotten.
Yeah.
And it seems to be the only good Fantastic Four movie we are going to get, because this new one looks like it might be the worst of all of them. Somehow. Bafflingly, how they keep managing to mess up a concept that honestly dead simple and easy to get right. I don't know, but they keep managing it. But no, I don't. Bird never described it as modeling the Fantastic Four. He described it as like he came up with the characters to reflect their roles in the family archetypally.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking of with Spear and Distaff. And then And then I realized, as you do anything like this, what really matters is you've got to have a good villain. So I created a villain. I had something in my notes. Whenever I get an idea, I write a little note in my phone, and then sometimes I can go over it and find something good. I had in my notes now, have you ever heard of what's it called? The Hanjo Masamune?
Doesn't ring a bell.
It's a sword. Masamune was a Japanese swordsmith, I guess, hundreds of years ago. And one of his swords, I think Hanjo was somebody who owned the sword a while later, and the sword became known as the Hanjo Masamune. And eventually it was lost. At the end of World War II, it was lost. And so I created a little story where the sword actually has some magical powers, and it was lost because it was stolen by somebody who has been using it for the years since that. His family has been using it in the years since World War II to start a little crime syndicate of their own. And so anyway, in my story, Spear and Distaff managed to find out the truth about it and bring justice to the world again.
Yeah, one of fantastic. I'll have to take a look at this story. One of the, like I said, one of the early ideas that I had that ended up turning into something else was a superhero story that was about the immortal Sir Lancelot in inner city New Jersey.
Yeah.
And it's really funny. Like we had on a gentleman, Father Augustine Weta, wrote a fantastic book called The Eighth Arrow that was about Odysseus in the underworld, and he needed to escape the underworld. And when we talked to Father Weta about it, he said, yeah, the original idea for the story, it was about a boy who had, I think, like machine guns for arms or rockets for arms or something, who had to escape from the underworld. And I said, you know what's funny is I feel like if you're not a writer, that sounds absolutely absurd as a change. But if you are a writer, I'm like, no, I totally get that.
Yeah. Sure.
Right? Like, because this idea of Lancelot ended up turning into like a gritty sort of inner city detective story, right? And it started off as a superhero story, but functionally it evolved from the same concept. So hearing him go, oh yeah, it was originally like an action story about a dude with guns for arms. I'm like, hey, you know what? I get it, right? Like, you get this idea, someone escaping from the underworld.
Yeah.
So I hear your story of how you came up with Spear and Distaff and all the things like, and I always find this stuff interesting. I think the reason that writers get so annoyed by the question, where do you come up with your ideas, is because there is no simple answer, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's why Harlan Ellison would always respond, yeah, we would give the wise Alec answer and go Schenectady, which is a great answer and I approve, but doesn't really answer the question. And I don't know, it's like, it gets kind of frustrating because you're sort of like, I don't really know what you're looking for as an answer. So if I actually told the story of where I got this idea, it would be like, I thought of it myself, but if you're looking, what you're really asking is what were the influences, and there are like 5. So, you know, I don't know, right? And if you're looking for like, well, then where did I come up with this idea? Where did I come up with this idea? Where did this come from? It's like lots of different places.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in theory, it's an original idea, so I don't know what you're looking for besides my brain.
Yeah.
I entered into a trance, and the strange things that live beyond the stars handed this to me and created an obsession that has now consumed my life. Unfortunately, they have given me no new ideas. I'm afraid the blood sacrifices will have to begin soon.
That's
To
a great
draw.
answer to give on an interview. Somebody goes, so where'd you get your ideas? And then he's like, well, every now and then I enter a trance. And then just go on from there.
Oh, you use drugs? I have been stone cold sober for 10 years. No.
It's like, so you take peyote or something? What? What's that?
I drink 2 liters of Dr. Pepper, entire bag of Doritos, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, either I think of something or I don't.
That's great.
I figure I'm either going to die or come up with an idea, and so far I'm still here.
Now, when I'm desperate and I'm up against a deadline, that's 2 liters of Diet Pepper. Sorry,
Yeah.
Diet Dr. Pepper. And, I don't touch that. I hold that behind glass, and my wife has the key.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. No, it's I'm glad to hear that you have other ideas. Do you have anything coming in terms of like full-length novel, or is that just too long for your style?
I hope to come up with a spear and distaff novel. The story that I've got is after they're already a going concern. They've been married for 6 months or a year or something. But I'd kind of like to go back and do a novel about their adventures when they become engaged, the night that they become engaged, and as they're walking through the park or whatever it is, the giant robot invades the city or something, and then, whoa, we have superpowers, we can do something. It won't be a giant robot, but something happens that calls for attention, and they discover that they have superpowers, and then the rest of the novel is the progress of their engagement and their subduing of the bad guy. I think I could make a novel out of that if I had the time and the stamina. So that's kind of my ambition, but so far I'm still turning around ideas and hoping to start one of these days.
Oh, fantastic. My immediate thought when you said spear and distaff novel was Super Baby, but
oh, well, that would come later. I mean, I would love to do a series of novels if it turned out to be popular, but the first one would be as they discover themselves, and then a second one set after the What God Hath Joined story would be some other supervillain or some other challenge that confronts them. I've got a list of like 7 general vague ideas that I could maybe pull together, but at the rate that I write 3 stories in 8 years, I'd really have to turn this into a much bigger part of my life.
yeah,
I'd love to, but I'd have to make room for it somehow.
I've had this discussion with Ken before. Doing Pinkerton's Ghost was actually very helpful for my writing because it turned into, early on for season 1 of Pinkerton's Ghost, the request was 1 3,000-word short story every 3 weeks was required. Mm-hmm. And really, functionally, it was every 2 weeks so that we had some time to record and, get it done. This was quite difficult at first, but got easier as it went. And this was an excellent practice.
I spent most of my time hiding in the closet, willing him on.
I knew you were there, Ben. Anyway, we're just going to move past that like it was a totally normal thing for us to say. Anyway, yeah, it was a very helpful experience because I was forced by dint of a deadline to write faster. And now I see 3,000 words and I go, oh yeah, I could probably get that done in a couple of days if I need to. Like it's not really intimidating. Like I should say, to be clear here, it's the length that's no longer intimidating. Now, if you were to tell me, hey, I need you to write me a short story for Pinkerton's Ghost in 3 days, I'm not saying I would necessarily be able to get it done. On the flip side, if you were to give me like an outline of it, like here's what I want to happen in it, then I probably could, all things considered, right? Like, the reason that I'm not writing right now is because there's a certain. So I have a lot going on. I'm getting married in December. I have other projects. I have work and things like that. So it was less the actual work with Pinkerton's Ghost, which really isn't that bad. We're not even on the 3-week schedule anymore. And more the mental pressure of knowing that this is another obligation. And if I don't get it done, I'm going to be letting people down. That I was like, no, I can't do it. I'm like, I'm sorry, Ben. I'm like,
I'm not over it.
He's not. No, Ben's actually been great. It's been in all seriousness, I very much appreciate Ben's response because I wrote I had a story due. It was like 3 days late of an already pretty extended time frame. I wrote it and I told Ben I cannot do this right now. I'm like, I'm sorry, I know. And then Ben's reaction was, yeah, I'm not that surprised. He's like, you're getting married in December. It's fine. And I'm like,
What's this about getting married?
Every show, Ben. Every show.
This is the first time I've heard of this.
You make the same joke, please. No. Ben's one of the groomsmen, so he knows. Anyway.
What?
Yeah, right. But no, in all seriousness, I actually do need to give Ben credit for that because his reaction was like, yeah, I kind of figured. And I'm just like, really? He's like, no, you're good.
Yeah.
He's like, you're getting married. It's fine. And I'm like, that's it? He's like, yeah, we're good. I'm like, oh, okay then. Hopefully I will get back to Pinkerton's Ghost one day. Anyway, I went on this whole digression to tell you that you can get faster with practice.
Well, that's encouraging. I certainly want.
Especially if I'm standing over you.
Yes. Hire Ben as your editor. He'll help.
I see.
And he is, I will say, I have had, technically speaking, 2 editors who have really done acquisitions editors, we'll call them, right? People who do actual work helping to fix your story. But really, practically speaking, one was Ben. The other was Vox Day, technically. But he didn't really do a lot to help. He kind of let me do it because I was the editor-in-chief of the book. And I have to say that I do think that even though I don't have a basis for comparison, I do think Ben did an excellent job and does do an excellent job with Pinkerton's Ghost, which is quite an ambitious project in its own right when you think about it. Coordinating 3 different authors, all with their own different main characters in a shared universe. And Ben has been very much the main architect of it. So if you do need an editor, I do recommend Ben.
Okay.
Thank you kindly.
Yeah, let's see.
I don't have anything to like. It's like one of those things. Working with Anthony has been great. Working with Ken has been great. Working with the other authors, especially David Halquist and Mario Marquetta, has been great. Like the benefit is that I'm not working with drama queens, and when there is drama, well, I work as a bouncer, so I know how to handle that. I'm not here for the.
To be honest, most of the drama has been if we're late, and generally if you call anyone out for it, I can speak for myself specifically, but I'm almost sure it's the same with Ken. It's mostly just us going, I know. Generally we're not really mad at Ben. We're just kind of like, look, I'm stuck, okay? Yeah, it has not been Pinkerton's Ghost, I think, has been a very good experience because there's also the old saw. I've seen John C. Wright spread this around very seriously. In order to really be good, you need to write at least 1 million words. I probably, even though I had been published before Pinkerton's Ghost, I was published in Jason Rennie's Sci-Fi Journal. And Jason is great. I love Jason. We both love Jason here.
Mhm.
But I was published in Jason Rennie's Sci-Fi Journal. But in truth, I was way less than 1,000,000 words, and my early stuff is probably not that great. I say this hesitantly because I don't want to throw Jason under the bus, and she chose to pay me and publish it. So maybe it's amazing, and I'm just too close to it to see. But I don't think it's that great in retrospect, looking back at it. Now I look at my stuff after Pinkerton's Ghost, and I'm much more able to go, you know what? Like, I feel like my judgment of my own work has gotten better, where I could go, actually, I think this is pretty good. Or even if I finish a story and I go, I don't know how well this works, Ben, you tell me, because like I'm not very satisfied with it. And generally, if I say that, I'm most of the time correct. Like Ben will tell me. He's honest with his authors. You know, if I tell Ben I'm not satisfied with this, how do I fix it? Generally, I'm right. It's very rare that Ben will go, no, you nailed it. On the other hand, if I say I think this is good, I'm also more often correct now than I used to be, if that makes sense. Like I've gotten a better a better judgment of my own work. So, you know, that's take it this and $1.50 will get you a cup of coffee at Dunkin', but take the advice for what it's worth. The more you write, the better you'll get.
Uh-huh.
That's that's the best I could offer you. Anything else anyone want to add? Because we are at 8:30 and we've gone over your works. We've gone over Arthuriana, the Kings of Corona, Pendragon Cycle. Ben, do you want to stretch this out to 9?
I do have some rapid fire questions for Mr. Tarquin.
Brilliant.
Favorite Arthurian myth?
Favorite Arthurian myth?
Legend, perhaps, would be better.
Well, you got the Grail story. There's a lot of them.
Sure.
There a specific one or just the concept of the Grail generally?
Yeah, the concept of the Grail.
It is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
I like the way Tennyson does it, actually, because the way that Tennyson does it is he has Arthur, when he learns that they're going to quest for the Grail, is actually horrified, not because there's something wrong with the Grail, but because he knows that most of the knights will fail and that it's not going to actually be good for them.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next question. What are you currently reading?
Oh, currently reading. I got an older book, Queen of Atlantis.
Nice.
Just the one that I've got right here by Pierre Benoit, I guess. Benoit. Which is, it builds very slowly, but it's one of these, you go to an exotic place and you discover a hidden kingdom and you have adventures there. It sort of reminds me of Rider Haggard, she, the dangerous magical queen type person.
Well, that sounds.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 100 years old, but
Yeah.
I don't know where I found it.
That's Queen of Atlantis, he said.
Queen of Atlantis by Pierre Benoit. And this was in University of Nebraska Press, bisonbooks.com. They have I remember as I was looking through this, they've got a lot of very good good-looking old fantasy books on that. Bisonbooks.com. I mean, things that I hadn't heard of, but that looked
Right.
interesting.
I dig it.
Yeah.
Bisonbooks.com.
Yeah. Worth checking out.
Favorite author?
Ooh, there are so many. John C. Wright would certainly be one. C.S. Lewis. Well, I mean, there's C.S. Lewis, but I've read like everything that he wrote that I could get my hands on 20 or 30 years ago, and then I reread them, and when I got to the point that I could could practically recite them, I started looking. Oh, and G.K. Chesterton, can't forget him.
Mm.
But that's already three. Like,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
Robert Cruzy, he's awfully good. I mean, as a modern, he's may not be really. Well, he writes funny things and good adventures. Robert Cruzy, his Mercury series, I remember him saying on Twitter that he hadn't really planned it out, but when I got to the end of the third book, I just thought that fits so perfectly, and it makes everything that has come up to this point, it just worked so well. It was funny and adventure-y. Fantastic. Anyway, so yeah, I guess I don't really have a single favorite author. I just have a lot that I like.
No, that's fair. You know, it's everybody should have a cadre of authors they return to. You know,
Yeah.
John C. Wright, C.S. Lewis is of course just a classic. You know, for more modern guys, I know you're familiar with Kursova, Thune's Vision, Skylar Hernstrom.
Yeah.
I could do for more of Skylar Hernstrom in the world.
Yes. Jim Breyfogle writes a lot of good stories too, and
oh yeah,
authors. He had one very fine one. I can't remember the name of it, but it was 2 or 3 issues back. Well, I'll have to let you know later.
that's all right. I've got the whole collection myself, except for I think the newest one, which I need to purchase. I bought some goods on Amazon, some snacks, some protein snacks, and I forgot to include the book. I was like, oh. Let's see. What are we looking forward from you in the future?
Well, you can certainly look for a book about spear and distaff, but I don't know whether you'll find it. I just kind of hope that I'll get that onto the pixels one of these days.
No problem. Well, I can't think of any other general interest questions to ask you, but that's okay. I'm trying to keep these things a little bit smoother, a little bit more professional. Smooth, baby. For some stuff for ourselves, the Kickstarter is over, and we funded $2,150 to put towards the animatic. I'm going to work on finishing up editing our rewards and get them put down to paper. I will have to say, unfortunately, my cover artist keeps disappearing on me, so I fear I will have to use AI as a stopgap. I'm not looking forward to that. You have to understand that this is the equivalent of a samurai cutting his own guts out over a dishonorable action. But I'm not putting these out with a cover that is less than good, which is a pity.
You want I could send you information for the guy who drew my cover.
We'll talk about this after the show.
Sure. Okay.
No, not that I mean this as a rebuke or anything like that, but that's more on the business side of things, and I don't like revealing my monetary practices publicly. You know what pine cones I hide them under in the forest. You know.
That.
The riddle
reminds me. There's a line in Parks and Recreation of all things, but it was a Ron Swanson line. There's a whole little plot line about like he has 2 ex-wives named Tammy who both manipulate him, and one of them goes like at the end of it you learn that Ron actually has lots of gold buried somewhere, and at the end of the episode he sends Tammy away and she goes like, well, it's too late, Ronald, I've already got your gold. And then she goes, woman, if you think that I didn't give you a fake gold hiding spot, you don't know me at all. Something like that.
Oh, that's great. But no, I'll be happy to chat afterwards. But no, the rewards. I'm currently in the middle of doing an editing pass. That takes a while. There's almost 150 stories, and about 120 of them are going to go into books and stuff for you guys to have. And I wrote these for people to speak out, not necessarily edited for publication. I've been wasting time, guys. I've been wasting time. But I'm rectifying that. I'm about halfway done, maybe 2.5 fifths done, somewhere around there. And that's what I'm going to be doing all Monday. But I do want to thank you all for your support, whoever's listening out here. It's very heartwarming to see this sort of thing because for whatever reason, and not all of it can be explained by me being obnoxious online, but for some reason Pinkerton's Ghosts has not taken off on YouTube, has a relatively small fan base, hasn't really grown into what I hoped it would be. But that's okay. The way I view it is that art is while you do want to create something that you can sell, you do it for itself rather than for some sort of almighty dollar. If you do it just for the dollar, just go into advertising, learn Memphis Standard, draw strange, homogenous pictures about people being happy that banks can use to entice women to use their services. I don't know where I'm going with this, but point is that you can be in advertising rather than not be paid as an artist. If you refuse to take the furry commissions, you will have to remain poor. The secret cabal of furry art investors.
Rule 0 of writing: don't quit your day job.
Right. It's if I start writing werewolf romance, I've sold out to the furry cabal. But no, I just wanted to say that that I'm just going to be working on it behind the scenes. When we receive money, we'll send it to our animator, who will take care of it. But for you, Justin, thank you so much for coming on here.
Thank
we
you
do
for.
appreciate. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just saying thank you for having me.
Oh yes. We do want to support people with our live streams, and we're happy to have supported you. Check out the links in the description. It leads to his Amazon offerings, the short story and Kings of the Corona. I do remember it from long time ago. But it's been quite some time. I'm happy to see it in Amazon print for whatever that's worth, and I will almost definitely pick up a copy sometime in the near future. Lord willing, as we say. Thank you all for coming, and we will see you next week, where I'm not sure. We'll find out. We'll probably do something fairy tale related, Anthony.
Ooh.
I'm probably gonna make you read some fairy tales or something. Yes. The first fairy tale, of course, being love. Love, Anthony. It's a fairy tale. That's why it's in all the fairy tales, is love conquering all. What a myth. What a legend. Doesn't really exist.
What's the fairy tale? I forget the name of it. About the woman who gets humbled and forced to be like a poor person's wife because she was too prideful.
Griselda?
That one was my favorite.
Well, we'll discuss it. Look forward to also some writing streams I will be doing probably late Monday and Thursday. Wednesday and Thursday. I'm going to try and do that regularly, as well as a Sunday afternoon stream, where next week I think I will go over maybe something from George MacDonald. All right. I'll talk to you
Ooh.
all